I think my dad's first love is Atlanta.
My name is Haley Stoddard. I am a specialist at Sotheby's and head of our Contemporary Curated auctions. I'm joined here today by Jana Portman, the daughter of celebrated Atlanta architect John Portman. We are sitting in the incredible space of Entelechy 1 here in Atlanta, Georgia. I would love to speak to you a little bit about your memories growing up in this incredible space, and if you can tell us a little bit about John for those who don't know about John and his legacy here.
This was such a fun house to grow up in. There's water running at all times. There are trees in the house. You sort of feel like you're playing outside. I'm one of 6, and it was just busy and crazy all the time. Even though it's modern and there's art everywhere and it's serious in some ways, it was just fun. It was just home.
Can you tell me what Entelechy means and what that word meant to John?
Entelechy means realization of a dream, and I think that so describes him and his approach to really anything he did.
And what would you say makes this home really a hallmark of John's architectural style?
The columns, he calls them exploded columns. And within the columns, there's a purpose. It's a stairway, it's bookshelves, it's closets. He would put closets in the exploded columns. And the thing about him with circles, it was always the circle and the square. So if you look at the drawing of this house, it's like a big square with all these circles inside of it. And if you look at a lot of things that he's done, there's this whole theme of circles and squares.
And that sort of flows over to the sister house, if you will, Entelechy 2.
I was 26 when that house was built. He had bought the land 10 years before he actually started building, and I think he changed his mind several times on what he was going to do. At one point, I think it was going to be a tree house. I mean, he was very creative and always thinking outside of the box. And a lot of the exploded columns are there. There's so many examples of circles and squares there.
And can we talk about sort of early influences in the creation of this house? You see this amazing contrast of materials, brick and wood. Were there any other sort of buildings or spaces that were influential in creating this home?
Well, he was a great admirer of Frank Lloyd Wright, and I think you see a lot of that there. His favorite museum on the planet is Louisiana, outside of Copenhagen, and there's a lot of similarity with that, with the brick and the wood. And that was built a bit before he built this house, so it's hard to think that he wouldn't have been influenced by that.
Right. I think Louisiana is such a perfect encapsulation of not only spectacular architecture, but how does artwork sit within an architectural space. And I think you have the same thing here. You have incredible works on the wall, many of which are by your father, is that right?
A lot are, yes.
He wasn't only an architect, but he was also a visual artist, a furniture designer, I believe, a lighting designer. So this home really encapsulates his entire practice. So we are standing in front of this beautiful Olga de Amaral work. Can you speak a little bit about why this artist appealed to John, why he commissioned works by her, I believe from the 1970s and 80s onwards?
He went to Paris and saw her in her studio there, and he loved the work. And because of the textures and sort of the warmth of it, he commissioned several pieces to go into a hotel and an office building to sort of be a contrast or soften large panes of glass or large concrete walls.
And those were hotels and buildings that he had designed, right?
Yes, yes. And I think where he really sort of related to Olga is that she was very much about nature and bringing nature indoors, and that is absolutely one of his themes. And I think they bonded over that, and it worked very nicely for his architecture too. I think that was the beginning of sort of a love affair, and now we have given 2 back to her family and tour with the Smithsonian and tour at the High Museum in Atlanta.
Amazing. And the two that you had given back to her family are actually now on view at Fondation Cartier, which has been such a widely acclaimed exhibition on her work and really one of the first major international retrospectives on her work. So now is definitely a moment of reassessing her career. She's one of the most celebrated Colombian textile artists, and I think right now she's really having a moment to shine.
She is, absolutely.
Did he think about this distinction between his private collection and what he decided to put on display publicly? Was that an important factor to him?
I don't think he made the separation at all. You know, the Truist Plaza versus our home to him was just the same.
And in that sense, I think his collection, he was very selfless in that regard. I think so many people, especially in Atlanta, got to enjoy his collection and the works. I would love to speak to you a little bit about the monumental Dubuffet work that's hanging in Truist Plaza, which was one of his buildings. That work is in many ways part of your everyday life. That's your office building, right?
Yeah.
What does it make you think of every day when you walk in the office?
I have a walk that I do from my office. You know, he had all these bridges that would connect the buildings, and I go over a bridge to go towards Peachtree Center, and there's this photo of him with some other people, and he is laughing, and his mouth is about this wide, and he thought he was really funny, and he wasn't. So I walk by that and have my own little chuckle, and then I end up going over to Truist and go down to the atrium level below and look at the Dubuffet, and we'll come back. It's just like a little
You're so
route.
lucky you get to see it every day.
I know, it's amazing. When I first saw it there, I panicked because I thought, why are we doing this? This is a valuable painting, and it's in this office building, and are we crazy? And he was like, no, I mean, it looks great there. I love it.
Right.
And it was just how he felt about it. I mean, it could have been anything, and if he liked it there, he would put it there.
Right. For me, from an art historical standpoint, I find it so fascinating that Dubuffet was an artist your father collected and looked at, because for so much of Dubuffet's career, he is really exploring the human being within space and within urban spaces. From his early portraits in the 1940s, depicting individuals in war-torn Paris, really through to this, monumental 1970s work that is in your family's collection. It's really about the human in an urban environment, and I think that was a fascination and maybe obsession that your father shared.
Yeah, and I think that sort of is why it's so fitting that it's in the Truist Plaza. I think my dad's first love is Atlanta. He grew up near downtown, and he would ride his bike all around where all these buildings are now. He worked as an usher in a movie theater downtown when he was a teenager, and I think he always sort of had this vision from a young age. And he started with the Merchandise Mart in the 60s. And that was the first building. And then one of the buildings that belongs to Peachtree Center, which was next to the Mart. And then gradually Peachtree Center, and then the Hyatt, which was, new in terms of the atrium, and that was a big tourist attraction, and the top that was the blue spinning dome that had a restaurant in it, and then the Westin Hotel, and then the Marriott Marquis.
Which is actually what you see on the cover of this book here.
So many of the buildings downtown he built, and I think he felt like they were his children. I think that's why there's no separation for him from his home to the buildings, because I think he just felt like they were his, and so much of him went into them. Right. And I think, though, aside from the Merchandise Mart, the expansion to the Gift Mart and the Apparel Mart, it brought so much business to Atlanta, that it really changed downtown. Everything was so different and sort of outlandish and not traditional. And he'd get an idea and think, maybe this looks impossible. Let's just see if we can do it. Right. One thing as being my father, I love so much about him is that he was all about, where do you go from here? He was not one to sort of dwell in the past and what if I'd done this, woulda, shoulda, coulda, all that kind of stuff. he was always like, okay, what are we doing now?
And what's next?
What are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
How do we fix it? How do we change it? How do we go forward? What's it going to be? And I love that. I mean, it's just a great approach to life.
And also looking across the trajectory of his career, it almost seems like each decade he did something different. He went somewhere different. In the 70s, we were talking about he went to Europe. In the 80s and 90s, he took on monumental projects in China, Singapore. So it seems like he was someone who continued to challenge himself throughout his career.
Definitely. I think that, you know, to be still is you might as well just hang it up.
Right.
And I think he just was on the move. He just wanted to keep going and creating and evolving.
Yeah.
And that's another great example I live by with him, is that, you know, we're all evolving and changing all the time, and should be.
Yeah.
And he is absolutely that person.